Right now, you're looking at live images from the funeral service for the late Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. President Biden and Chief Justice John Roberts will deliver eulogies soon. O'Connor died earlier this month at 93 years old. Joining us now to discuss her life and her legacy is Alexander Volokh. He's a law professor at Emory University, and he clerked for Justice O'Connor during her last term on the Supreme Court. First of all, let me just, we want to offer our condolences for your loss. And I think I want to begin where we just ended there with introducing you, which is, what was it like to clerk for her in her last term as justice? Because she did something that a lot of justices don't do, which is retired. What was she thinking about? Was she thinking about her legacy? I know that she was somebody who was forward-thinking, not backwards thinking, but just want to get a sense of what she was like as she began to prepare for her last days on the court.
Yeah, it was very surreal because she announced her retirement in the summer of 2005. She didn't even think she was going to be on the court. Come October, when the arguments started, she was going to be replaced by John Roberts. But then Chief Justice Rehnquist died suddenly in the early fall. Like you said, many justices just don't retire and they die right in office, like Scalia, Ginsburg, and so on. And so she agreed to be on the court for as long as it took for President Bush to get a replacement through the Senate. But it was always unsure how long she was going to be on the court. At first, President Bush appointed Harriet Miers. That didn't work out. Then ultimately, he appointed Alito. And so Justice Alito replaced her. And so she knew that, you know, with a different court, they're different people, and there are going to be different decisions. And many of the reason she was so influential was because she was really in the middle of the court, 4 people to the left of her, 4 people to the right of her, and she was able to frame the kind of big national settlement on issues like abortion and affirmative action, sort of moderate positions on abortion, affirmative action, and many other areas. And she knew that once she was on the court, there were going to be different people, and who knows how long her opinions on those matters would survive. Just in the last 2 years, of course, the Supreme Court has rejected her view on abortion, has rejected her view on affirmative action. I don't know if it took longer or shorter than she thought, but she knew that many of the things that she stood for would now be on the chopping block because she would no longer be on the court and with different people or different interpretations.
You know, she was the first female justice, but I'm sort of curious as to how she approached that. Was that something that she considered or was aware of when she got down to business of being a justice, or was it something that, you know, we sort of write about and those who write the history books write about, but it was not her focus?
Well, she was very aware, of course, of being the first female justice, and she had a whole political and judicial career before where she had fought for various women's rights causes. She had trouble getting a job out of Stanford Law School in the 50s because people wouldn't hire a woman as a lawyer, even though she had graduated near the top of her class at Stanford. Then she was in the, she was a lawyer, and then she was in the Arizona legislature, fought for various things related to married women's property and so on, eventually became an Arizona appellate judge, and that's where she was when President Reagan elevated her to the Supreme Court. So she knew she was the first, and she hoped she was not the last. I believe she said that a few times, and she thought that it would be good if there were more women on the Supreme Court. Now, of course, there's a good number. But I don't think that she really took that into account in her judging. She just felt like, well, I'm here as a justice and I do the job of justices. And so, you know, I'll do the job just the same as anybody else. Just read the briefs and see what I think is the best interpretation of the Constitution or the statute. So she ended up being kind of what she was when she was elevated that is a kind of moderate Republican who voted with conservatives on some issues, voted with liberals on other issues, brought to the job a very pragmatic approach of what would it take to make the law work, and that was basically her style. So I didn't really see that she thought of it as a particularly woman style, or that there was a particular way that women decide cases. Of course, she was on the court when Justice Ginsburg was elevated later, and so she and Ginsburg were on the same side in some cases and on opposite side in a great many other cases. And she knew that women can be conservatives, liberals, or whatever.
One of the things that you said is so striking to me. You talked about how there are a number of women on the court now, but I go back to 1981 when I was probably, I was 12 years old, and when President Reagan nominated Justice O'Connor to the Supreme Court, I just remember it was sort of a big bang moment. I think even for us as children, we talked about it in school. Our teachers celebrated this momentous occasion where, for the first time in the 200+ years history of our country, we were going to have a woman sitting on the Supreme Court. It's kind of normal now. I think if you're a younger person, you don't see it as that big of a deal, but it was such a big deal when we were kids. And you talked about her evolution in terms of her opinions over time, how perhaps President Reagan may have thought of her and how he expected her to rule and to opine on certain cases. Ultimately, how she ended her career, which is, as you say, sometimes she sided with the liberals and sometimes she sided with the conservatives. But just going back to that moment in 1981 was just so, I just want people to kind of think about how the world was back then and how it is today and why it was such a momentous occasion.
I think that's right. I think it's obviously very important when there's the first female justice or the first black justice, much like, I was already an adult when Barack Obama became the first black president. And so there are many barriers that are broken that way. And of course, that's a cause for celebration, because it shows that at least to a certain extent, the country has gotten beyond certain prejudices. Now, then the question is, do those people rule any differently or act any differently once they're in the position? And I think that's the whole premise of breaking down these barriers. Well, for many people, the premise is these other people, whether it's black people, women, or whoever, are just like everybody else. And so just, give them a chance, and then it turns out they will be completely normal. Like, that is the ideal, that ideally we should just appoint whoever is the best person, and then they will act completely normally. So I think that just like Barack Obama was the first black president, but if you looked at his presidency without knowing his race, would you say, oh, yeah, he was definitely a black president? No, he was a competent president who had particular views, and he approached, he tried to further those views as president. And so, he was a normal president, which is exactly the goal. And same with Justice O'Connor, that she really broke a glass ceiling, and once she was there, she really just did the judge as a judge, and tried very hard not to let her identity, not in any explicit way, get into her judging. She was just a regular judge like any other moderate Republican that President Reagan might have appointed.
Alexander, take me back in time to when you were a wee young lawyer and you were looking for someone to clerk for. Do you remember the decision-making process, why you wanted to clerk for Sandra Day O'Connor, and was the experience what you had anticipated?
Well, I think any law student coming out of law schools, I mean, the reality is that Supreme Court law clerk hiring is very much an elite school business, that almost the vast majority of them come from really the top law schools, but still, it's only something on the order of probably less than 40 law clerks a year, because there are 9 Supreme Court justices, and each one of them has approximately 4 clerks, and then there might be some retired justices at any moment that might have 1 clerk. So let's say roughly 40 law students a year. Out of how many thousands come out of U.S. law schools, and even who come out of elite law schools? It's still a very exceptional thing. And so most law students apply to all the justices, whether they agree or disagree, just on the theory that once you're up there, it's going to be such a unique experience. It's going to be such an honor that it really doesn't matter. Of course, you prefer to be with a justice who you agree with more of the time, but really that's of secondary importance. You just want to be up there and see the process and work closely with these people who are very important and helping to make these judicial decisions which are important for the country. So it turns out that Justice O'Connor was, I didn't agree with her all the time, but she was pretty much a good fit for me, and so I was very pleased that that's the way it came out.
And can you just talk to us a little bit about her something that I heard her son say, Jay, on a recent interview, where he talked about the fact that his mother, although her actions were consequential for the nation, her opinions were consequential for the nation, she always approached them with a focus on building consensus. Can you talk to me a bit about that, like how she thought about the nature of consensus building as it relates to the court, and ultimately how it relates to all of us living here in the United States as Americans?
Well, yeah, I think that there's no justice who thinks that consensus is the be-all and end-all. Of course, consensus is not the number one thing. Ultimately, you have to figure out what a particular statute means or what the Constitution means, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to vote that way. And because you're not going to vote for something that you disagree with just to make it look like there's a consensus. And so any justice, and Justice O'Connor, maybe more than most, will be part of a number of 5-4 decisions, which show some very strong divisions on the court. Sometimes it was 5-4 on the conservative side, sometimes it was 5-4 on the liberal side, and in many cases are not conservative liberal. There's just whatever justices believe in whatever, and so she joins with 4 various justices to make a 5-4 opinion. So she was part of very many of those, but still, there were many very controversial issues where she was instrumental in crafting a kind of consensus position. I think abortion is the most, probably will spring to mind for most people. In 1973, so that was way before Justice O'Connor's time. In 1973, the court decided Roe versus Wade, which produced a very strong protection for abortion rights. And that was polarizing from the very first moment. When Reagan became president, it was assumed that he was going to appoint conservatives who would be eventually part of a majority to overrule Roe versus Wade. And it was expected all the way through the first decade of Justice O'Connor's tenure that eventually she would be a vote to overrule Roe v. Wade. And she signaled that over a number of cases. But then, 1992, it actually came time to do that, a case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And so there were some justices, conservative justices, who said Roe v. Wade should be totally overruled. States should be able to regulate abortion if they want. And there were some who said, no, actually, Roe v. Wade is fine. It was fine from the start. It still is fine. So we'll still have very strong protection for abortion. But she was part of a core of 3 justices who were in the middle. And they produced what is now called the Casey regime, where they said there still is this core right to have an abortion. It's just that we've been giving too short shrift to the interests of government in protecting potential life. So the government should have more of an ability than it previously had to regulate abortion, but still it can't produce what's called an undue burden. It can't be an undue burden on the pregnant woman. And so the way she expressed it, we're still reaffirming the core holding of Roe v. Wade, but cutting back on it a little bit. And so that was the moderate position on abortion, which was the law in this country for 20 years, until about a year and a half ago, when the Supreme Court overruled the whole Roe and Casey regime. But so that was a case which I think was a very great disappointment for many people in the conservative movement, that she and also another Reagan appointee, Justice Kennedy, and a George H.W. Bush appointee, Justice Souter, rather than being votes to overrule Roe v. Wade, they were votes to essentially reaffirm Roe v. Wade, but at the same time cut back on it. And that was a kind of consensus compromise position. It didn't get a majority of the court, but because it was right in the middle of the court, that became the actual binding rule.
We just want to point out, which people would have already seen, the president is here. President, he's going to be delivering one of the eulogies. He's sitting next to the Labor Secretary, Julie Su. Alexander, your brother also clerked with Justice O'Connor. I'm curious as to how close your family was with the justice, and if you were close, I'm curious about how she felt about the current state of the court.
We haven't been very close with the justice, and it used to be that every 5 years she would have clerk reunions either in Arizona or Washington, D.C., and that was a great moment to make friends with or reconnect with old friends who were part of this Sandra Day O'Connor community. She really liked to see her clerks, and she really loved when her clerks had children, and she called them her grand clerks. In fact, when our kids were born, she sent us these SOC, Sandra O'Connor, SOC Grand Clerk onesies. So that was very nice. Anyway, she did like to keep in touch, and I used to visit her sometimes when I came to Washington, D.C. And in fact, there was one time when I was there with my oldest son, who's now 15, but maybe he was 3 at the time, and he was like running around her office and picking up all these things that he wasn't supposed to be picking up. Anyway, she really liked to keep in touch, but as she got older, that became very difficult, and eventually she had Alzheimer's, and it was hard to keep in touch with her, and she had retired to Phoenix. Anyway. So I really don't know how she felt about this current post-Trump era.
Right.
I'm sure she would have had very interesting thoughts. She always considered herself a Goldwater Republican. That is Barry Goldwater, right, who ran for president in '64.
Alexander,
yeah.
I'm so sorry I'm going to have to interrupt you. You've been fantastic sharing your stories with us, Alexander Volokh. Thank you so much.